Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, August 27th, 2025 meeting of the Middle School Building Committee. This is a hybrid meeting and we are officially called to order. We will begin with public comments. We have 15 minutes for our public comments allotted. And if there's any member of the public, where did we decide? Folks in person we're heading. Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll start with anybody in the room who'd like to do a public comment. Come on up, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cameron Burke. I live at 25 Woolworth Street. I know a lot of you have seen me a lot in the last couple of weeks. I am working with the group, the Longmeadow Smart, and we're just trying to educate people to understand that they need to come out to town meeting and hopefully vote yes. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you here, who are here. I know it's been years in the making. The work you've done, the education you've done to tell everyone in town what's going on and to keep us informed, educated, and open to opinions, I think has just been invaluable. When we talk to people, I just want you guys to understand that we're getting so much feedback that everybody feels like they've been a part of the process, people who we're talking to. I don't know who other people are talking to, so I can't speak for them, but time and time again, the website, the videos, everything has been incredibly helpful. I don't know one person who thinks that the middle schools are in good shape, so this is an opportunity, and I just want to thank you all for the time that you've dedicated to all of this. So, thank you. I don't have to convince you to do it. So.
Thank you. We have no other members of the public in person, but if there are any members of the public online who would like to speak, feel free to raise your hand or turn your camera on. All right, seeing none, we are moving out of public comments and on to approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for July 23rd, 2025. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. Marty?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Chris?
Abstain.
Josh?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Carissa?
Yes.
Michaela? Or not Michaela, sorry, Julie?
Yes.
Thank you, and yes for me as well. All right, that moves us to correspondence. We had one piece of correspondence, which is an email from Jerome Noonan dated July 27th, 2025 on the topic of a New York Times article on turf fields. That ends correspondence and brings us up to new business and a schedule update. Adam, I'm guessing that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So schedule update is, as everybody knows, we have a town meeting, a special town meeting on September 9th at 7 o'clock, and that's where we will vote for funding this project, where we need a 2/3 majority vote for that. And then following that, a positive vote would be the town election, the ballot vote, which would be on September 30th. So that's really what we have for schedule update, but we just want to remind people that you know, with the project coming up and the warrant has been posted, I'm sure everybody's seen it, that we've gone through, you know, 2.5 years of looking at different options. We've, you know, started off with a dozen options and studied all those options for everything from a code upgrade all the way to a new consolidated building. And, you know, throughout that study, we've looked at, you know, different locations and different, you know, scenarios. And, you know, this committee has decided that the best option is a consolidated middle school between the two schools at the Williams Middle School site. And so we've worked with the MSBA all along this process and have multiple meetings with them as well. And they have approved the project scope and budget for that, for, you know, the $152 million consolidated middle school at the Williams site. And so right now we are obligated to bring that to the town to fund that project. And there's no option right now to change that without a failed vote. Essentially, you know, if this vote goes in front of the public and it fails, we have 10 days to submit in writing to the MSBA what the vote outcome was and what the town's, the school district's intention is of moving forward. But there is a policy that's in place. I think, Marty, you have that. Yeah, it's up on the screen here. So you can see highlighted in yellow. This is there's, you know, goes through the 10-day process that you have, but at the very last line says, however, A failed local vote likely will result in the school district being required to submit a new statement of interest to the MSBA and await an invitation from the MSBA to enter into the eligibility phase of the MSBA process. So that line there, I think, is pretty heavy as far as saying that, you know, you have the 10-day option, but most likely you're gonna be put back at the bottom of the list and you have to resubmit. Which means, you know, this 2.5-year process that we just went through, we would have to start the process over again. And the MSBA will not fund another feasibility study, so that would be 100% on the town. And, you know, this process started, I think, back in 2007, when the first statement of interest was actually put through. So if we think 14 years ago that it took to get to this point, you know, nothing is gonna get cheaper at that point. So we'll have to go through the entire process again. There's gonna be, you know, the whole study that's gonna go through again, and you know, most likely, you'd probably come back to the same option. And so if you have to wait that, you know, 5, 10, 15 years for that to happen, and you come back to the same option, you're gonna pay a lot more money for that, you know, scenario at that point.
How much was the feasibility study? Was it about 2 million?
1.8 million, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 point.
And we got about half of that back. Or we will. in theory.
Yeah, our reimbursement, yeah,
Yeah.
is, you know, the just over 50%.
So
for
next
that.
time around, it might be 2 million.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because everybody's fees go up at that
Yeah.
point.
And so I know that some of the chatter, let's just renovate the 2 schools, which all that, we've obviously talked that to death.
Right,
Could we, let's say we fail
yep.
and we want to do a new statement of intent, could we do a statement of intent and say we want to renovate our 2 schools? Or is it 1 school?
So essentially it's one school. So when you submitted a statement of interest, you had 2 middle schools that were listed there. But you had Glenbrook as a priority school. And so when that school is accepted, the MSBA allows you to look at a consolidation. Because you're taking, because the MSBA is looking at it as, you know, now I don't have to fix up 2 buildings. If you guys are, you know, willing, and if it educationally, you know, is a betterment to the town to have 1 building now, that's what the MSBA would prefer, is to see a consolidation. That's what we're seeing a lot of all the different projects that we do is consolidations.
And the MSBA only accepts 1 application per community, so they would not accept an application for Glenbrook and an application
So we couldn't
for
say,
Williams.
yeah, and there's, 1 application cannot be, we want to do our 2 new schools.
Correct.
Correct, it would be one or the other,
Project.
yes.
Okay.
And so you would do that, and then, you know, a few years later, you would submit a second application to do the other school. So again, that brings that, you know, inequality between, you know, education at the middle school. So you have 1 school that has all the you know, the new state-of-the-art facility, and then you have this, you know, the other school that's in its current condition.
So we could be talking about worst case scenario, even best case scenario. The second school we're looking at, we could do it in 20 or 30 years.
Correct.
Can I, can I clarify too?
Yep.
My understanding is this statement of interest, so if we were to submit a new statement of interest to the MSBA, are we allowed to make a change that drastic to the statement of interest that says we'd like to renovate instead of?
For that 10-day period you're
Correct.
talking about? No,
Yes.
so you still have to stay within the scope. So you can't say, okay, I have, you know, a consolidated building, and the vote fails, and say, never mind, I want to do a renovation.
Exactly.
You know, it's minor changes that you can make to see if you can have
So we
a
would be
positive vote
adjusting
the next time. which
budget,
is
scope, and sequence in smaller ways.
Correct.
Minor issues
So we could
related to the
sub-
project, which means, in essence, if we were to say fail and we felt that the town overwhelmingly, for example, wanted a renovation of both schools, our choices at that point become either we as a town are funding fully the renovation of both schools, or we are saying thank you anyway to the MSBA, going all the way back to the beginning
Right.
and resubmitting for Glenbrook in the hopes that at some point in the next 4 to 8 to 12 to 14 years, which is
Yes.
approximately how
Yep.
long it took the last time, we then get reaccepted for 1 school. We then go through this process again.
Right.
And then maybe we land at renovation. And I wanted to just highlight again that when we started this project, I know that for a lot of us, we weren't entirely sure exactly where we were going to end. We started with, what was it, 12, 14?
Yeah, it was about a dozen options. yeah.
About a dozen options, and I know that I went into it very much thinking, I don't know if I think we should do a renovation, or if we should do 2 schools, or if we should do 1 school, because we didn't have all the information yet. And we worked our way towards a decision of this. If in let's say it's very quick, 4 years, the
Mhm.
MSBA re-accepts us. We literally start that same process again. A new
Correct.
middle school building committee will be seated. A new middle school building committee will go through the feasibility study. A new middle school building committee will consider the options that are in front of them, and very likely, as we did, will move forward with a plan to consolidate and move forward with both schools becoming
Correct.
one. There is no
To that-
reason to believe that they would necessarily fully decide. They could, but they also could, we could end up right back here again,
To
but in
that
several
point,
years.
What's the reimbursement rate for renovation?
So the reimbursement rate is the same, no matter what option that you
So
choose.
renovation did not have the same kind of,
But so it's the language that you're looking at. So
Yeah.
our reimbursement rate is the same, but what's eligible for reimbursement, that's what's different.
Significantly less.
right, so what the reimbursable aspects of a renovation campaign was significantly less
Correct.
than a new build.
Correct.
So.
Because with a new build, you have all the energy efficiencies that you can build into the project.
So I don't know who's choosing renovation at this point over new build. They're clearly not looking at the economics.
If I can clarify on the renovation, if you do renovation, they have what they call incentive points, that if you get LEED and you get certain incentive points to add to your reimbursement. If you do a renovation, they have a few extra percentage points that they will give you for a renovation because you're not building a brand new building. So but it's minor in nature of when you look at the total project cost.
Right.
Just a reminder, back in '21 or '22, we did submit statements of interest for both schools.
Correct, 21, yep,
Only Glenbrook was invited in.
correct.
Yeah.
Just, so
Correct.
I think
Yeah.
that kind of got lost in all of our work that not that we need to keep it at the forefront, but for the public who might be watching, this has been a long conversation and both
Yeah.
schools were thrown in. We tried for both schools, not that we
Yeah.
would have necessarily decided to do both, but we know that there are needs at both schools.
Yeah, and as a town, we've put in for statement of interest multiple times over the last years, since almost 20 years now, it's 2025.
Correct.
Over the last 18 years, since 2007, at repeated intervals, and have been turned down by the MSBA. 2021 was when we were accepted for the one school of Glenbrook.
Yeah, and so we have to think of it this way too, that the MSBA is earmarking money for this project. And so there's plenty of other communities out there that are in the same
Sure.
situation. They want to have schools built, that if we don't have, community support for this, they're going to look at it as, well, we have other communities that probably do. So we're going to, pass this money along to another community, and you guys are welcome to submit again. But even on the other side of this, and Nick can even attest, is if we don't do it, if it does fail, we have issues at these current schools that we're going to be spending money on,
Correct.
roofs, mechanicals, all those types of things that are millions of dollars that are going to be spent fixing the existing schools up while we're waiting to eventually do something with the schools.
So it's still not a neutral decision or a net zero decision. We are still expecting to see significant costs associated with waiting in addition to moving forward.
Right.
And if we want to get reimbursed on those other things, it's like with the center school roof, we can enter into the accelerated program, but we can't do that for every project.
Right,
And
yeah.
this-
There's no guarantee you get accepted into that, and we just learned that MSBA is no longer doing an every year accelerated repair program, it's every other year. So that pool of candidates or applications is gonna grow.
In fact, they did not do it last year. It started back up in 2025.
Right.
So, just to clarify one more time on the bottom left, that, within that 10 days, we could say, like, all right, fine, we'll do a gymnatorium, not a full auditorium, but not, that's it, that's about the extent of it.
It's really, yeah, introduce
I
yourself.
haven't introduced myself yet, but I also can't sit here because I've been doing this for 20 years and it's killing me. My name is Mark Abdella. I'm the Vice President of Construction Management for Fontaine, for the privilege of working with Dave, and the privilege of working with Dory and Christian and Alan and Adam. The 10-day period, if there is a failed vote, is very specifically for the town to communicate back with the MSBA whether or not it has a plan to revote on the same project, and if so, how. It is not go chop a wing off the building. It is not downsize anything. It is not remove a field or a parking lot. It is strictly 10 days to say, please don't run away from us. We can get this done. Here's our plan to vote again.
And they can still say
That's
forget.
it. Well, yes, they could.
Yeah,
at that
and that's why
point,
that last
I
line
think they're
is pretty important.
incentivized to support communities to try to find a way to get these votes passed. But two biggest misconceptions in communities all over the state, at the stage that you're at, is one, in that 10 days, we can find a way to change what the design is, which you cannot. I mean,
It's 10 days.
you've been working on this for years, right? You can't switch it in 10 days. The other thing, for communities where there's folks reasonably from outside the process asking the question, why can't we just renovate? It's important to understand that the MSBA has different programs for different types of projects. That accelerated repair program is, we need a roof, we need a boiler, we need windows, which these schools need, right? But you're in another program, the major capital core program, which is about enhancing the academic experience of students. It's about modernizing and updating the delivery of education. And so, while you've got a number floating around to renovate these buildings, that should not assume that the MSBA would participate in it, because that's like upgrading the building codes. It's not impacting the academic experience. So it's not, in those 10 days, we don't go back to the MSBA and say, hey, can we just renovate them, we're backing away. It's just not how the process works.
Right.
So, and it's a very common and difficult thing to communicate to folks that haven't been involved every step of the way. Been doing this for 20 years. It's not easy for me to explain, but that is the reality where we as a committee, as a project team, as a community sit.
And what you just described was the economic analysis we did, 18 months ago?
Yeah.
We had them side by side by side by side. We compared the numbers, one next to another. And that's how we down selected to, I think, a handful at that point in time. It wasn't even the top one.
Right.
So, I mean, those numbers are available. They're on the record. So whatever number somebody's talking about that would suggest this is the better approach, they're looking at the wrong numbers. They're not the numbers that we looked at. I don't know who came up with those.
And whatever the repair renovation number was, at no point did the MSBA say that they would participate in that as an
Correct.
option. They would have pushed and forced you to find a way to renovate and repair while improving the academic experience, which I'm guessing, like it's just not part of the
dramatically
process once you
change
decide
the
that's not what
numbers
you want to
that we
do,
looked
right?
at
Exactly.
Related to renovation.
Exactly, yeah.
Because our renovation numbers, if I'm recalling correctly, were strictly to bring the building up to code.
Exactly.
Yes.
Kind of a
The-
base repair. is the
Yeah, so
terminology
it's
for the-
Base
essentially
repairs
bring it up
up
to
to
code.
Yeah.
And it also does not include the FF&E portion of it too, which is your furniture and fixtures that go along with that, the technology that goes along with that.
Correct.
It's, putting fire sprinklers in and, those types of things, making it ADA compliant. And again, at the town meeting, again, that project scope and budget, it is, what it is essentially. And so there's no modifications that can be made at town meeting, so, none of that is an option right now. We have a binding agreement with the MSBA right now, between the town and the MSBA, that this is what's being voted on, and what's being voted on is to fund this project.
Just
Can you
Good.
speak to that last part one more time? I know that's something that you had reached out to the MSBA related to amendments on the floor, et cetera. Can you share what?
Yeah, so the amendment piece
Information
is, it's, yes, somebody can get up and they can, make a motion to amend, but what we would have to do is we'd have to go back to the MSBA. So there would essentially be, a no vote, and you would have to go back and you would have to make an amend, you would have to write the MSBA and let them know that there's been a motion that the change in scope. So now you're breaking that agreement that you have with the MSBA.
Which puts
And-
us into this.
Right, so then you have to go through that process, you have to meet with the MSBA board, and resubmit to them, the preferred option.
Okay.
Which again jeopardizes the funding of the project.
With the base repair approach, you're talking about no guarantees from the MSBA, a much longer horizon, less results and more money at
Correct.
the end of the day. I mean,
Right.
it just doesn't make sense.
In the educational
And no
piece-
educational
the-
enhancement.
Right.
And
Yeah.
again, it's not a option that we're discussing that has any footing right now.
One other
We would
thing-
have to begin with the MSBA again and wait for them to again invite us in and wait for that middle school building committee to choose to move forward with a request for base repair, and then have the MSBA agree to it, and then maybe be in a position
to
where
get a
we
lesser
could
product for
then
more money.
do that project.
Lesser
Yes.
product, more money.
One other thing that, this is Dave Fontaine from Fontaine Brothers, one other thing that is also worth considering in that in renovation is remember that there's a significant time period where if you're doing a renovation, you'd be displacing people from the existing buildings.
Correct.
Right, so during, if you were to renovate these buildings, it might be a 2-year, it might be a 2.5, 3-year construction process at each school, during which time you might need to have modular trailers, you might need to have swing space in different buildings throughout the district. So just something when renovations are considered outside of cost that we often see districts, weigh in as well, is that you'd be disrupting the use of those buildings for, several years each and putting people into likely, modular classrooms and stuff
Which
like
are also
that.
not reimbursable.
Or they're not interim.
Correct.
There's a cost issue, but also just,
The
disruption.
quality of
Educational
education
piece, yeah.
is most important there, yeah. All right, other thoughts or comments related to town meeting or the ballot vote or anything else on this topic? All right, we're gonna go ahead and move forward then to, now we'll officially go ahead and introduce Fontaine Brothers and move into your presentation.
Take it away. Didn't know if there was any drum roll or any intro.
You already spoke up, so it's all.
Right, exactly.
Sure, so I'll get started. I know Marty's got a couple slides from kind of, condensed version of our presentation maybe, but we'll kind of work to go through it. So again, my name is David Fontaine, Jr. I'm CEO of Fontaine Brothers. Our firm has been selected through the process to be the construction manager for the project. Really appreciate the process that we went through. It was thorough, it was well done. We do a lot of school projects throughout the state. And, really appreciate the consultants that have been selected so far and the way that the process was run. So really excited to be here. Again, alongside me is Mark Abdella. Mark is our Vice President of Construction Management Services. As Mark said, has been, in the MSBA process for over 20 years now, and has been with Fontaine for close to a decade now. Working almost exclusively on public schools throughout the Commonwealth. So we'll just kind of breeze through some slides. We are based proudly here in Western Massachusetts. Our main office is right up the road in Springfield, Mass., but we're proud to have built across the state over 130 public schools. So it's the vast majority of what we do as a business. There's over 50,000 students each day that, that unique expertise, in building public schools and working on occupied active campuses and in being part of projects like this is a big part of what we do and what we're proud of. We're also proud to have done many projects together with Jones Whitsett and with Colliers, the consultants on the team. So we bring not just a great working relationship, but, also, very little learning curve and a track record of, delivering projects on budget and on schedule. We've, done all kinds of projects with Jones Whitsett and Colliers, including projects using innovative green technologies, and we know that timber is a big part of the program here, so we're excited about that. Our company and our firm has several Longmeadow residents. We have people that have put kids through the schools, and, our leadership group all lives within, 15 minutes of the project. So, really excited to be a part of it, not just to be part of something local, but also bring that local knowledge and perspective to our role in helping to make the project successful. You can see a screenshot here. There's a video that we put together that's, publicly accessible, and that I believe many folks on the committee have seen. We know that one of the most critical elements of success for the project is going to be, limiting, any kind of disruption in the neighborhood, working closely, obviously, with, the occupied school and keeping everyone well-informed and safe throughout the process. We've done a lot of work in the pre-proposal stage and proposal stage and making sure that we're, approaching the project in that way, and we're confident that the approach that we propose will deliver that. Obviously, we've been a part of a lot of MSBA projects, both, at this stage prior to the full vote as well as after the vote, so we're familiar, with our role in supporting that. And communicating, and we'll continue to be a part of the project team as we communicate out to the public. And then I think Mark will go through, this is just
Just as we were talking a second ago, it is always surprising to me how common the questions that you hear at this stage of the process is from community to community. And when you don't live and breathe the process every day, a lot of these questions are just natural and normal things to ask. So, we're glad to be a part of the team coming into town meeting and coming into the ballot vote to help just communicate, clarify, make sure the information that's out there is accurate and clearly articulated, and that we can be available to help answer questions as they come up and come along. So
And so for our project team, you'll continue to see myself throughout the project, you'll continue to see Mark. And we've also put together, a team that will lead the project. Mark will kind of go through the
Yeah.
folks that are on the screen, who are all part of the interview and local as
Yeah,
well.
the selection committee met all these folks. I mean, one of the fun parts of my job is figuring out who the right combination of people are in terms of their skills, their experience, their availability, their personalities and their chemistry with each other, and what we see as their personality and chemistry with all of you and the consultants. So pictured up here in the middle is Jason Boudreau, who's our proposed project executive, grew up in the area, is currently leading our project over in Agawam. His role is naturally not a full-time dedicated role. He naturally runs 1 to 2 to 3 jobs at a time. So it's perfect where right now we're drilling the geothermal wells in Agawam that will be one of the initial scope items here in Longmeadow. So he'll be bringing that knowledge of local subcontractors and the technology right on the heels of it. To the right, Dave Briot, also grew up in the area, Springfield resident, drives by the Williams site constantly with his kids and his family. The two, Jason and David, are finishing up a job up at UMass Amherst right now that has heavy mass timber elements with the same structural engineer that's working with Jones Whitsitt on the design of this job. So it brings a lot of really good working relationships and knowledge of the structure and the elements of how to efficiently procure that. To the left of the screen, Kevin Batillier lives in East Longmeadow, and he could walk to the site. Very experienced superintendent, recently finished an elementary school in Westfield. Prior to that, finished a school in Shrewsbury. He's very familiar with working with public subcontractors, working on occupied school sites, keeping them safe, communicating well, clean. They're a great team, really fortunate to have them available for when we will need them here in Longmeadow, which we project to be next summer when school lets out.
And we worked with Kevin out in East Hampton.
That's right,
Yeah,
and
which
has
was
worked
a
with.
fantastic project. A lot of these, folks here toured
Yeah.
that school, and it came out.
We've all built so many schools, it's kind of hard to remember all of them, quite honestly. I mean, it is what we do. We are, a company built and focused on school construction. So bring a lot of, not just local knowledge, but knowledge of the market. That team is really the core once we get into construction that you'd see more day to day. Prior to that, we've got a team of really multidisciplined experts in anything you could possibly think of. Scheduling, safety, estimating, sustainability, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Virtual design and construction, BIM modeling, which everything that you're looking at from Jones Whitsitt is coming, virtually 3D. We've got a whole team of experts. They're used to doing this on public school design and construction. And the ringleader who you'll see a lot of come the fall is Chelsea Mutry, who is a fantastic leader of this group. She comes from a design background, an owner background, a builder background, just really talented, but also just a fantastic personality to work with and kind of pull all the pieces together. I think I touched on the timber already, Marty. Let's kind of breeze through that. We've got tons of it. We've done it with Jones Whitsitt. We're doing it. There's elements of it at East Longmeadow, elements at UMass. When we go to procure and buy this work out, we've already started talking to vendors and subs. It's a really unique, interesting element of the design, and we're really excited about that. Another interesting and unique element of the design that we dug into and shared with the selection committee are the geothermal wells. I mean, we've seen a huge spike in popularity with those. We're actively drilling on 3 jobs, I believe, right now under school construction. Again, on occupied sites, understand how to work around the academic calendar. We understand the impact on neighbors and how to mitigate noise and disruption. All of it is something that's very familiar and comfortable for us. Stop me, I can breathe, and you can ask questions at any time. I think you've all seen the video. We spent a lot of time. That was my voice in the background. We had a ton of fun. I mean, there's a number of residents here in Longmeadow who are in our office, several of them on the East Longmeadow job, and are wishing they were available to be here. But it was a really great collective conversation to dig in and think about how to be very sensitive to, construction traffic coming in and out of town, control of the site, all those sorts of things. So we've got lots of things planned for the fall to get off to a fast start and queue ourselves up for a very busy summer of '26, and moving forward from there.
Well, you can just kind of keep scrolling through, Mario,
Yeah.
and see if there's anything else we want to, specifically touch on. But I think just to underscore, this is one
So
more thing,
for
just,
Tom,
that
yeah.
a lot of what we do is work with communities on making sure that the new buildings, as they're turned over with the new and advanced systems, right, with, the significant energy consumption of the systems are tuned up, to work most efficiently. And, we also, we're from this area, we will be involved, not just, pre-construction, during construction, but post-construction, beyond the warranty period. We'll always be around, to make sure that the building is operating as efficiently as it can, and, continue to provide that experience from our in-house MEP group as well. So, I think just to kind of wrap up that, quick part of the presentation for
I'm
us.
sorry, what was your name again?
This is.
No, I know how it is.
But, we're really excited about the project. We get to build schools all across the Commonwealth, but, the areas that we really enjoy and are most proud to work are right here in our backyard. So we're really excited to be here and be a part of the team.
All right, great. Questions, thoughts for Fontaine? I had a couple of questions I was wondering if you guys could address.
Go for it.
You'll be the folks for it.
Of course.
We've had some neighbor concerns related to project disturbances, vibrations,
Yep.
runoff potential, both
Mhm.
during and after. Can you
Sure.
speak to any of those concerns and/or assurances
Yeah,
related to them?
Heather?
Well, so I attended last night, I was at an abutters meeting,
Okay.
where we, specifically, went to make sure we heard those concerns firsthand. And so a couple things that we went over last night that, we can reassure everybody. Number one, we'll be very mindful of work at, all the adjacent property lines. We always are. It's something where, we know that we're a neighbor for several years during construction. We know that construction, will entail, dust, will entail noise. And we will do it in not just as minimally disruptive of a way, but also in a way where we communicate with people what's gonna happen, what the purpose is, what the duration is, right? So that they know, what's going on and why, right? Specifically for this project, with several of the property lines being, residential streets, we'll work with the design team and the OPM to make sure that as landscaping and buffer areas for those, abutters are brought into focus, that we'll actually engage with them on, placement of the trees and stuff like that to make sure that they're, as well for screening as possible. And another thing, specifically when we work in neighborhoods that are tight like this, is we'll offer, all residents and abutters that are adjacent to the project pre-construction surveys so that we can document, the condition of all homes, of all property lines and stuff, so that if there, is concern during the project about any negative impact from construction, right, that, the prior state of everything is documented. If there's anything that needs to be repaired, it's clear, concise, and will be addressed, and will be covered by us.
Perfect, great. Thanks for being there for that, too. Appreciate that. And then I think the other one is we get, oh, go ahead, did you have more?
I was just gonna add one
Yeah.
thing that came up at the abutters meeting last night that I think Dave handled very well, was the tariffs that are out there now, and what the impact is of that, and how do we stay on budget, and what happens. I thought it was one of the best explanations of the extra $1 million that we're carrying over our contingencies to guard against any tariff increase, because we have a $150 million project. What if it goes over budget and we run out of contingency funds? And I thought, Dave, you could give that explanation again. It was great.
Sure. Yeah, so, something that we're hearing all across the state, right, and that we're obviously dealing with in real time across all of our projects is the impact of tariffs, the impact of, pricing instability. And, tariffs are maybe the latest flavor of pricing instability, but we've been dealing with it, pretty consistently for the last 5 or 6 years now. And, I guess in regards to the tariff question, or really the way the budget is built, we've reviewed the independent estimates that have been a part of building the overall project budget. We feel that the estimates are well funded. We feel that the costs that are represented right now are appropriate for, the schools that we're building and for the marketplace. We feel that the contingencies that have been, added or kind of, baked into the estimates right now are appropriate. And, as Alan brought up, there's actually an additional specific line item contingency within those estimates for tariffs, which we think is prudent at this point. You know, a couple things as far as controlling the budget in relation to tariffs is that it's important to remember if you had a $100 million project, you know, roughly about 40 million of that money is in the material cost, right? So, you know, if you take 100 million and you break down labor, material, and, you know, general conditions and staffing and stuff like that, it's probably 35 to 40 million that's materials that are most, you know, able to fluctuate with that. And within those materials, there's many different materials if you looked around the room, right? You have ceiling tiles, you have steel, you have that. And many of those materials are pretty stable, even now have been historically, if you look at it. The materials that are most volatile are the ones that are, you know, subject to market volatility, copper and steel and things like that. So the actual real value of those materials within the project is not as high as, you know, might be feared. But also we're locking in the costs of those items at the subcontractor level. When we're purchasing it, we're purchasing the project in stages, so we're only committing to, you know, 20% and then another 30%, so we can adjust on the back end if we needed to, you know, make allowances for overages. And, you know, really, I think that we're managing right now, I believe, a dozen or so MSBA projects, you know, all of which are at or within their budgets in these 3011s that have been developed through the estimating process. So we're paying very close and special attention to it, but we're working actively to mitigate it and control the risk.
Great, thank you. That's exactly what I was next to ask.
Okay.
Perfect timing. All right, any other questions, thoughts for Fontaine Brothers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, video presentation, right, you know, really stunning. I thought it did a great job of getting this committee excited about choosing you. What's your, I know we don't have a limited time at town meeting, but what is Fontaine's involvement in the presentation at town meeting?
We'll be there and available to answer any questions that come our way. My understanding is the superintendent is going to lead the formal speaking remarks.
Yeah.
And then we are going through the process to be able to be present and acknowledged by the moderator to answer questions.
So our intention is that we have 10 minutes from the moderator for our presentation, but we'll have a team of people available to answer questions from the design team, from Colliers, from Fontaine, town officials. And so we'll have, you know, additional slides ready if there are specific questions, let's say about the geothermal project or project costs, that kind of thing.
Can we show the bird's eye view from the video that was going around
The Fontaine.
yeah, from the Fontaine video?
That's a possibility. I'm trying to remember the link for that. We have 10 minutes. So
Well, there was just one part I'm thinking of where it kind of swoops in and shows you,
Yep.
I don't remember if it's being built or it shows you it has built, but I
Yeah.
think that would be really,
Potentially clip it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can, I'll circle back with Mark on that. Maybe we
Okay.
can get a little snippet of it.
Yeah, for
sure.
happy with
Perfect.
anything we can do.
All right, thanks.
All right, if there's nothing else, we're headed into project cost review. Ms. Stackland.
So we have,
That makes sense.
Ian Cox,
Welcome,
our
Ian.
town finance director, is with us, and he's put together some information that we thought would be helpful to the community and to the committee. So give me a second, I'll pull that up.
I figured it would be helpful, but based on the discussion that we had tonight, I feel like I'm almost belaboring the point. So it's really, I'm gonna try to make this even shorter than I originally thought it would be. But in terms of what I wanted to show you guys tonight, so we've had a lot of discussion so far about the costs and about the implications of the vote. So I really wanted to give a high-level overview of what that will look like for the town and the impact of that on our finances. So we've already discussed so far about the current implications of the vote, so I won't get into that. But in terms of what I'm looking at as the finance director and at the town finance level, when we look at these projects, one of the big things that we're looking at is the current debt obligations that we have. So what projects are already going on? What projects do we expect to do in the future? And how does that fit in with this new consolidated middle school? So in terms of the numbers used on the slides, you'll see I showed two different examples. The first example is given the project that we know now. So if the town votes yes on both votes, the first slide will show you what that timeline is in terms of the debt service. If the project were to fail, I gave a estimated example of what that could be in the future in terms of both costs and timeline. So this is something that you have all seen hundreds of times. So just to kind of give everyone in the public or those who haven't seen this, these are 3 of the different options that the Middle School Building Committee looked at in terms of projects. And option 8A, the Williams Consolidated Middle School, was the project that was selected with an estimated total project cost of $151 million. This is to be presented for vote to the town on September 9th. So this slide shows the current debt service as of 2026, and I apologize, it's a little grainy. I'm not sure why it is, but in terms of the actual impact here, what you're seeing is in the gray bar, that is our debt excluded debt, and in the blue bar, that is our non-debt excluded debt. Our debt excluded debt are things like the Council on Aging New Adult Center. This is the DPW facility that we built. These are our large capital projects that are 20 to 30 year obligations that the town has. As you can see, from 2026 to 2027, we have about $1 million drop off in our debt obligation. Now, why is that? There was prior planning done by people before me, both Lynn, Paul, the former finance director, and the members of the committee, who planned to have this fall off in debt time as we knew that a potential middle school was on the horizon. So in the 2 particular projects, DPW facility and the Council on Aging facility had higher principal payments early on in the project, so that come 27 and 28, when we were supposed to do this project, we would have enough debt capacity where it would not be a severe impact to the town. As you can see, the next time that we would have a potential drop-off is in 2034. Remember that, as I will mention that later in the slides again. You can go to the next slide, Marty.
Okay.
So this is what the project would look like if everything goes to plan and we get a yes vote. Now, I don't want to mince words here. It is a very expensive project. We all know that, we understand that. In terms of our debt service, we are essentially going to double our debt service in terms from 2026 to 2027. However, it's very important to note that in the way that we're doing this project, this is a debt exclusion. What that means is that the property taxes that will be raised in order to pay for this project will absorb the debt service cost to the town. This means that the current budget as it states would not be financially impacted by this project. It would essentially net out where the new property taxes that will be raised to cover the life of the debt would in turn cover the debt service that is now part of the budget. This is really important because as many communities we are hearing from are struggling with overrides, rising health insurance costs, rising pension obligations, and a multitude of other things. We certainly don't want to put the town in a precarious situation where by building a new middle school, we then have to take other options and not do the things we want. This is one of the reasons why we're doing the project this way, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing a debt exclusion vote. So I'll go really quick through this, but we already talked about what would happen if the vote does not pass. This could take, Adam, you talked about even longer timeline, but another 2 to 5 years to conduct a study and determine a new solution, and there's no guarantee we'd be invited back into the MSBA process. Next slide, Marty. So in terms of the additional costs that are involved with this, we have to pay for a new feasibility study. So that's approximately $1.6 million. There's no guarantee that this would be reimbursed. So this is an additional cost that we would incur outside the reimbursements that we would receive. Additionally, I'm sure Nick could give us more costs than I've had on here, but in terms of immediates, we would have a new chiller and the roofs are both up for replacement. So we're talking about $12 million of projects that will need to be done whether or not we do the new schools. So if we were to do the new schools, these costs would be lumped into the new project, therefore we wouldn't have to worry about them. In this case, as we talked about earlier, these projects are not necessarily eligible for MSBA accelerated repair. So that we would be out of pocket the full $12 million of costs, if not more, for these projects. And finally, the longer we wait, the more expensive this project will be. We don't know how long it'll take the MSBA to add us into the process if it were to fail. I show an example of what that would look like in terms of timeline, but again, this is conservative in nature and could truly be higher due to tariffs or other economic conditions. So this is an updated cost of Glenbrook Code and Williams Code that shows a 3% escalation over a 5-year period. I am assuming here that it would take us about 5 years to go through the whole process. Sounds like from you, Adam, it's going to be a lot longer than that, so take this with a grain of salt. If you go to the next slide, Marty. Old costs to new costs. So just in 5 years, using a 3% inflation, we would add between $11 to $13 million of cost to our total project if we just chose to do the code upgrades. And I'm not even going to do the new school because I want to show the code upgrades here. So this is really important to me because 3% inflation, as we've seen in the past 5 to 6 years with COVID and other factors, is really conservative. We could see inflation costs of 5 to 7% or more. So at $11 to $13 million, this is a huge ask for residents to have to sit on this. So currently, the new Williams Middle School has an MSBA reimbursement rate of 56.37%. That includes the 50% plus the incentive points. As we do not know the true reimbursement rate for the code upgrades, for the sake of this exercise, I used a 36% reimbursement rate. How I got that is with the base reimbursement rate of 50.57% of eligible costs, it comes out to about a third of the project. So this shows what that would be. So for this chart, what you'll see is a 5-year wait and then a 2-year construction period for the Glenbrook Middle School, and then the Williams Middle School to be built afterwards. This chart also includes additional debt costs for the chiller and the new roofs. As you can see, our debt service would be substantially more over a longer horizon for both these projects if it were to go this way. And as been discussed tonight, there's a potential that we'd only be able to do one project, so we could actually see this timeline pushed out even farther. I don't want to belabor the point any further, but what I really want, if you go to the next slide, Marty, I want you guys to understand that this does not account for any other projects or emergencies that come up. These buildings are past their useful life, we know that. Older assets require more maintenance and have more expensive repairs. It was said that we could do this entire process again and we could come to the same exact conclusion, and we've essentially wasted 5 to 7 years, if not longer. That is a very real possibility. And finally, by restarting the process, this could put a delay on other projects that are earmarked on the town's 5-year capital plan, whether that be water and sewer projects, whether that be new equipment or trucks, or other buildings that need to be rehabbed.
All right, so do you have any questions?
Yeah, Nick, you're gonna love this question. So, I think it's kind of a moot point because everyone agrees that the schools need to be updated. But let's say we didn't do the code upgrades and we just said, all right, well, we'll just see what happens. Do we have any ideas? Yeah. Has there been an estimate? Is it possible to estimate how much that would cost over the life of the school?
We did work to quantify it in the beginning of this process when we were making the SOI, and all the numbers point to build a new school, which is why we're so gung ho to fill out the statement of interest, because all the systems are due, from the roof to the boilers, air handling systems, plumbing, top down. we're, you know, every day you wonder if today's the day.
And we
something's
can't do
gonna
it
break.
all at once anyway. That would have
No.
to be, that's just gonna be
Yeah.
every year, big items, big line items in our budget, which we don't have the room for.
Yep, new statements of interest to try to get into accelerated repair programs, which takes time, and these systems need to be updated now, so it's, now's the time to strike.
Other questions or discussion?
The only one thing I want to add is the MSBA has a very fantastic system that they're doing. It's the envy of the surrounding states, but with any kind of change in Boston, we can't guarantee that the MSBA is still going to be in existence to do this going forward. So it's not like it's locked in stone, that they're going to be there in 5 or 10 years now to help us out. So it's like, it's a risk you take.
True. Other thoughts?
One other thing that you brought up last night, David, was kind of the market conditions that you're seeing
Yeah.
on other projects as far as how you're bidding.
Sure. Yeah, so, you know, obviously right now there are, you know, things like tariffs. There are, you know, COVID-related inflation, which is certainly, I think, petered out in the building industry. I'd say if you were speaking about the building industry more broadly, and specifically if you look in Massachusetts, right, like the epicenter of Massachusetts construction has always been the Boston area and Eastern Mass, and I believe that I heard recently that Boston permits are at a 30-year low, or, you know, a significant, like, slowdown, certainly anecdotally for, you know, our industry over the last 10 or 15 years. So, you know, I think that we're seeing, if you look at bid results across MSBA projects right now, that all of the projects that have been recently bid, you know, that we have been involved in as a construction manager, bid as a general contractor, you know, the bid numbers are coming in at or below the estimated budgets currently. You know, that is favorable, obviously, for projects that are in the position that you are to continue, you know, marching forward and potentially take advantage of, you know, the market being slow right now. You know, if you put yourself in the shoes of a developer, right, and, you know, they don't know what interest rates might be, or that, you know, they're gonna be more sensitive to sign on to financing risks and stuff like that. So, you know, the private sector building is much slower to, or is much faster to start or stop. So right now, the lack of private sector building is creating, you know, from what we see in the market, good opportunities for public projects to continue and benefit from the market slowing down. So, you know, there's data on that across the state, but certainly projects that are on this track are historically and currently across the state coming in on or under budget.
All right. Next steps.
Nicole, can I ask a question?
Sorry, Julie, didn't
Sorry.
see you there? Yes.
Oh, and I'll figure out how to lower my hand. I was just wondering, you know, I think part of what has been really appealing about this project is the way that you all have figured out how to minimize the impact on students, you know, during the construction phase, and then obviously moving in and whatever. Marty, can you talk to us a little bit about what the impact on students would be if we went this route of trying to, like, repair the roofs and sort of deal with ongoing maintenance on the older school buildings?
Yeah, I think that for starters, you're doing one building at a time. So, you know, if you're choosing the MSBA path, you're doing one building at a time. So you're potentially creating some inequities. And the further you push these projects off, the more learning is impacted by the air quality challenges that we face, the life safety system challenges that we face, the accessibility challenges that we face. And then, you know, when schools, you know, when you are piling project after project after project, you're inevitably going to be disrupting education. And you make a great point, Julie, that probably needs more attention, is that the path that we're taking will not disrupt the education of children during their time at middle school. And that can't be stated enough. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but and certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I guess the other half of my question, which is a little bit uninformed, is like, if we went this route of dealing with repairs, it pushes some of those costs back into kind of like the regular school committee budget capital projects kind of path, right? So it seems to me like that would also be just a bigger challenge for the schools and the town to navigate along the way. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and these base repairs, whether you're doing it with the MSBA or you're just doing it with the, you know, with the town's effort, as Adam pointed out earlier, it doesn't capture furniture, fixtures, and equipment. You're not introducing new equipment, new spaces, new instructional technologies that will ultimately benefit learning. And we have a chance here to reimagine middle school education. And we have a chance to, as Mark mentioned earlier, when you enter a core program at the MSBA, the expectation is that you're going to elevate education, you're going to change the delivery model, you're going to improve outcomes. And I'm very confident that this project will do that.
Something else we should mention is we've listened to a lot of opinions about the challenges of building a new school, and there's been a lot of effort to address those comments. Those comments don't get addressed if we do repairs on these schools. So the traffic issues that we'd be addressing with the queuing system on property, that doesn't get addressed with a repair. So there's a lot of learning that's gone into this process as well that will benefit others outside of the students themselves.
And I think that if you were to picture, for example, a renovation at Williams, you know, you picture right now the traffic pattern as it is, and then picture adding, you know, 30 to 50 to 80 tradespeople on that site, right? Like, you would likely need to utilize space that might currently be utilized as the field for laydown and storage or in the back area. So, you know, just, I think that that's the thing with the renovations, that you can't put on a cost study, but that you think of the disruption of, you know, going through and renovating these buildings. We've been part of, you know, phased renovations and stuff like that, and ultimately in the MSBA, renovations are, you know, once you trip certain thresholds with codes and stuff, and Dorian Christian would be able to cite what those are, but you're at the end of useful life for systems, right? So you're replacing systems, you're going through ceilings, you're replacing roofs, you're replacing windows for better energy efficiency. So ultimately, if you look at a building, you know, what you're leaving behind by the time that you also do new plumbing required for code and stuff like that, you're tearing up those slabs. So when you look at a building that's deep in the midst of a renovation, that's you know, anything beyond just let's do a roof, that's a different path, but a real renovation to make a significant impact, you're touching almost every piece and part of that building while you're doing it, and you're also, you know, to the extent that the buildings have hazardous materials within them, you're you know, working on those materials while the buildings are occupied versus while, you know, kids are out of them and everything. So, you know, there's a lot of those logistics and phasing and safety things to consider as well with renovation versus new.
Yeah, and not only do you have a campus full of contractors, you have a campus full of now modular units that are there that's taking up all that, you know, all that space as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and Ian, I know you had mentioned that your estimates were conservative, but in addition to that, I'm guessing you can speak to, having been a part of renovations
Mhm.
at other places, that those estimates do not necessarily speak to, everybody's done some renovation at some point in their home,
Mhm.
and, oh, now we've discovered X that needs to be addressed, or this
Correct.
problem has suddenly been uncovered, and that's gonna change those estimates as well. So those estimates are not taking into account what might arise
Right,
during
and
a
you can,
renovation.
you know, in the design phase for a renovation, you can certainly do some exploration, you can do some, you know, disruptive type stuff while the building is unoccupied in order to try and account for some of those things. But ultimately, you know, you can't see everything behind the walls, and, you know, you can't account for what types of structural issues might come up while you're in there. So I think that, you know, you see renovations have significantly higher contingencies. And you have, you know, when you speak cost uncertainty, like, that's a more difficult cost uncertainty question to solve for than, you know, material procurement and pricing and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think for a lot of reasons, a lot of districts that we've been involved in, as it seems, you know, you did here, have carefully vetted the renovation and the new construction options, as you do required through the MSBA process. and have ultimately come to the conclusion that new is the best path forward, and consolidated, and getting, you know, 2 schools at once is a path that we've seen many districts go down very successfully.
Especially with those new energy codes that are out now, to renovate an older building now, those energy codes that you would have to upgrade these, you know, these buildings individually, that's where a huge expense comes from and a huge undertaking.
I just wanted to speak to that because I know it's been a while, but that, I want to be clear that we don't have a vested view against renovations in principle. A really huge trigger for this has been the new stretch code, which has significantly increased the challenge of renovating because it adds a much higher energy efficiency requirement to the building envelope. And that's what really pushes the delta between renovation and new construction, such that it's surprising to people that renovation would be equal or higher in cost. But that is a product of a very specific regulatory change. And it's applicable across the state to buildings of this age, of buildings of a certain type. So remember when we went through all that before, it was very much driven by that, and also driven by the fact that the existing building ceilings heights wouldn't allow the ventilation systems to be installed without radically changing the heights in the ceilings in the classroom. So there were real performative impacts that were ultimately so detrimental, it really negated the value of the savings that you would think that you would normally get. And those would have impacts beyond cost. They would also have impacts on the quality of the experience. So that's just a little bit more information about that energy code impact and how we're seeing that play out.
Thank you, Dory. Other thoughts or last comments? Anything on next steps? I'm not sure who's got
From our end, obviously, we have the vote coming up.
Yep.
In just over a week now, right? And then in between now and then, there's some community events that are happening that we're gonna have tables set up at, that, you know, informational tables. I know we have back to school nights coming up. There's a sports night coming up on Thursday, which I believe, Marty, you're gonna be attending. We have the Pride Festival that's coming up. We'll have a stand there. So there will be other events that are happening between now and the vote time to come up and ask questions and get some information.
All right, wonderful. Lynn?
And just to let you all know, on Monday night, the Finance Committee unanimously recommended this article.
Wonderful.
And select board's voting on it on Tuesday.
And the school committee voted on it previously as well, a couple of weeks ago. All right, seeing no other comments or things, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. Marty?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Carissa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And yes, for me as well. Have a good evening, and we'll see everyone at one of the community events,
Thank
or
you.
on the 7th.
All right.
Good night.